r/shortscarystories posted by you/certain shadows. The ledge. You don't want to do this. I yelled as I leaned out the office window. But the man remained where he stood on the building's ledge, the tips of his shoes peering over the concrete. He gazed down numbly at the throng of spectators congregating on the ground below. Many were filming him. "You don't understand," he replied sadly. "It's over. She's left me." He was close enough to be within my grasp. I slowly reached towards him, thinking he was too immersed in his anguish to notice me. I was wrong. "Stop that!" he shouted, and shakily inched further away from me. I shrank back. Already the crowd had swollen in number, many more had gathered to watch the gruesome end of an unraveled man. I knew it would be just a matter of time before the cops arrived. I prayed they'd be accompanied by a negotiator far more trained than myself. "Listen, man," I pleaded, "I know we've never met before. I'm just the night janitor who went to clean your office and saw the window open. But I can tell from the framed photo on your desk that you've got people you love. Are those two girls your daughters?" He nodded. "How do you think they'll feel when you never come home from work?" I spoke every word in a calm, even tone, though inwardly I was panicking. "Don't you think doing this would hurt them for the rest of their lives?" The man began to cry. "Look, I get it," I continued, never taking my eyes off him. "I'm divorced myself. It's hard, but it doesn't have to be the end of the world. Your kids still need you here." I reached for him again. This time he didn't back away. "Come on," I said encouragingly. "I won't let you fall." He hesitated, then slowly began inching closer to the window. I was so absorbed in the moment that I never even heard the office door open. Just as his fingertips grazed against mine, I felt someone place a hand on my shoulder and roughly pull me away. Startled, the man on the ledge lost his balance. "No!" I yelled. But it was too late. He'd already begun to fall. His terrified scream meshed with those of the horrified onlookers. I'll never forget the pulpy sound of his body hitting the ground. I turned around and locked eyes with the cop. Tears streamed down my face. "Why did you do that?" I demanded, my voice trembling with grief and rage. "I had him." He shook his head solemnly. "No, you didn't. Last night he climbed onto the ledge of another building and threatened to jump. A man fell to his death trying to save him." An unsettling sense of confusion washed over me. "I don't understand." "You weren't going to pull him back inside through the window," the cop replied gravely. "He was going to pull you out of it." Posted by you/perfect_nightmare. Someone broke into our home. It was every family's nightmare. My wife and I had the day off work, and we had taken our son out for lunch and some family bonding time. But as we approached our home, something felt off. I had a growing sense of dread the closer we got. As our house came into view, I could see that the front door was wide open. Someone had broken into our home. I told my family to wait outside, in case the intruder was still inside. They obliged, and I slowly and silently made my way through our house. As I stepped into the living room, I saw broken furniture, nothing in its correct place, just utter chaos. Was this person looking for something? Did they have malicious intent? Why our home? Why us? Next, I walked to our kitchen. The fridge had been emptied. Dishes and food were thrown all over the room. What kind of person had broken into our home? A homeless person who just needed food? If so, why had they destroyed the living room? That's when I heard it. Footsteps in the bedroom. The intruder was still in our house. I took a brief moment to be grateful that I had asked my wife and son to wait outside. It was impossible to decipher this person's motive so far. But I was about to come face to face with the person that forcefully entered our home. And I would demand answers. I crept toward the bedroom slowly. I approached the door, and focused on the sliver of light slipping through the crack. I could see faint shadows dancing in the light. I raised my hand, placed it against the door, and took a deep breath, readying myself for whatever may be on the other side. I pushed the door open and stepped through the threshold with authority. I couldn't believe my eyes. I actually rubbed my hands over them, thinking I was imagining things. There, in my son's bed, was a young girl with curly blonde hair. She stared at me with wide eyes. She must have been terrified. I must have been a few feet taller and at least 100 pounds heavier than her. I must have been a sight to see for that little girl. But she should have considered that before breaking into my home. I called my wife and son to see what I found. "Is that a human, Papa?" "Why yes it is, baby bear. That's dinner." r/shortscarystories posted by URV Connie. The blind child. Stabbing. Sylvia pointed a trembling finger at my brother Arthur. Her milky, unseeing eyes gleamed in his direction. and his wife, Agnes, trembled with indignation from across the table. My husband's face colored as he dropped his fork and dragged our daughter back into her bedroom, scolding her as they went. The rest of the night was awkward, and the pep in our conversation never recovered. 2 weeks later, Agnes was stabbed to death in her office parking lot. An inebriated college student found her, almost vomited all over her, and called the cops. My brother swore that he bore no ill will against my daughter, but I could tell that he was lying. One day, the middle-aged woman who taught my daughter how to read her braille called me. "Ma'am, I don't know what's going on, but your daughter's been whispering, 'electrocution, electrocution,' for the past half hour, and it's starting to distract her from her lessons. Could you please talk to her?" I did. Sylvia, in her 9-year-old lack of understanding, told me it was just a cool new word she'd learned at school. The death of an electrician made headlines the following week. It was a freak accident involving tangled wires and a bucket of water. Sylvia's teacher's face was blurred for privacy, but her voice was as familiar as anything to me. He was my partner, my soulmate. While my husband was working late, I called Sylvia into the living room. "Honey, is there anything Mommy should know?" She hesitated. "Honey, you know you can talk to me." She denied it once more. "I have no secrets from you, Mommy." My husband walked into the living room with his hair tousled and his eyes distant. Instead of rushing to hug her dad, Sylvia simply turned towards him. "Fire," she said. My heart stopped. Every time Sylvia said something like that, it was the person's partner who died, and of that reason too. A fire? Was Sylvia merely making predictions, or was she putting a curse on me for snooping in on her business? Why, this devil child. I grew paranoid, checked the appliances and electronics constantly, and cleared the house of any fire hazards. That was my life over the next few days. All the while, I kept my eyes on Sylvia. Sylvia. I had grown almost hateful towards my own daughter. My husband came home one night, wounded and blackened with soot, while I sat in the living room and Sylvia listened to the radio beside me. "What's the matter?" I asked. He gulped. "One of my colleagues, her house caught fire. She was trapped in, but I managed to escape." That turned the gears in my head. "What were you doing in her house?" The expression on my husband's face was a sufficient admission of guilt. I opened my mouth to speak, no, to scream, but a smaller voice from beside me looked at me and whispered, "Poisoning." Posted by you/Panzeek. My family. I died 8 years ago. It wasn't particularly tragic. Or unusual. Just a car accident. I don't blame the man who hit me. He was speeding because his wife was in labor, and there was black ice on the road. He lost control of the car and I lost my life. It's not his fault. I know that. I'm not cruel. I am not vengeful. If anything, I'm the opposite. You see, I don't have any family left and I had lost my few friends around that time. When it was time for my funeral, the only people who came was my boss and the family who killed me. The wife held her newborn daughter close to her chest. I hated my boss, and the cemetery was awfully lonely, so I followed the family home. Lily may as well have been my own flesh and blood. She was sweet, and bright, and oh so very small. She had trouble sleeping if someone wasn't rocking her crib and her parents were so tired. After they put her to bed, it was easy for me to rock her crib for her. I didn't get tired. I could help her. As the years passed, Jack and Lori realized that they weren't alone in the house. It didn't take long from there to make a connection between my funeral and when I had showed up. And I'd never been malevolent, so they weren't afraid or angry. They started to burn candles on the anniversary of my death day. They left an empty chair for meals and holidays. I really felt like a member of the family. Someone is trying to force the door. It's Lori's ex. He's obsessive. He's angry. He's going to hurt the family. My family. The thing about ghosts is that the more offerings you get, the stronger you become. I'd been enjoying candles, trinkets, and even the occasional food item for the past 5 years. I was strong from that. The knife feels warm in my hand. A shock of heat against the ice of my skin. Lori, Jack, and Lily are my family. I care about them. And they're not gonna join me yet. Posted by you/Cornus my waifu. She's perfect. The first things I noticed were her earlobes. They were detached from her jaw. I remember reading in high school that was a genetic difference amongst primates. I reached up to touch my own earlobes. Detached. We're so alike, I joked to myself. Then I noticed her eyes. They were green, but not the kind of green that makes a big deal of itself. More subtle, like moss in a forest. They were wide and a little clouded. Like she'd really seen some things in her life. I then noticed her hands. They were dainty and small, but her fingernails weren't manicured and her fingertips were calloused. I wondered if she played guitar. Or maybe a ukulele. But she wasn't like other girls, I could tell. I smiled. The more I looked, the more I admired her. I felt like I knew her from just one look. The last thing I noticed was the hole in her head. It was such a minor detail, I barely noticed it at all. Her auburn hair covered most of it anyway. She was deep, she'd felt things that I couldn't even fathom. I read her chart. Female, 24. Self-inflicted gunshot wound. Unclaimed. I chuckled. Strong, independent, and single? My type of lady. I easily slid her covered body into its place in the cabinet. Before I closed the door, I gave a final wink. Until next time.